far away. Let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love not long ago.
Aloha, everyone. This is Larry Camp, and welcome to the Nobody Knows Your Story podcast, which just happens to come with a side of Hawaiiana. Nobody Knows Your Story is a podcast which I believe will impact each listener in a positive way. As you listen to the experiences that have transformed, shaped, and guided each guest, perhaps you'll better understand your own personal journey. Some will surprise, some will make you question, and some will inspire, but all will leave you in a better place for listening in. As for the Hawaiiana, well, that's just a big part of my life story. So I invite you to check in from time to time, or better still, add Nobody Knows Your Story to your list of favorite podcasts. You'll enjoy hearing the life experiences of people just like you.
My pretty baby was calling me, and she said, ooh, baby, please hurry. But I'll rush, I'm moving real slow, 'cause I want you to enjoy the magic show. And she said, ooh, baby, please hurry. Though she may be miles away, my love will always stay. And when this dream shall end, I know it will be then. I think I keep my love away from more than you so tight through the darkest night. I miss you, girl, I miss you much. I miss your old-fashioned touch. I miss you, girl, I miss you much. I miss your old-fashioned touch.
Aloha, everyone. If this is your first time listening to Nobody Knows Your Story, or if you're a subscriber, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to what I know will be a very interesting life story. Now, we just heard Old Fashioned Touch performed by the Opihi Pickers, and mid-podcast, we're going to hear Chardonnay with her hit song, Sweet Island Music. My guest today is Kelle Sparta, also known as the Spirit Doctor. Now, this brief paragraph from her website will kind of give you listeners a little bit of an idea what Kelly is all about. Again, this is from her website. In 1998, Kelly had her own spiritual awakening. She realized that she had created the American dream, and she hated her life. So she sold her house and her business, divorced her husband, and moved out of state to live with shamans and witches. She would spend the next 4 years doing deep healing work on herself. Then, well, hey, I'm not going to tell the whole story. We're going to let Kelly do that. So, Kelly, welcome to Nobody Knows Your Story.
Thanks.
How was that intro?
That was cool. It kind of starts you in the middle, though, which is kind of interesting for me because I was 28 when that happened. And so do you want to go back to the beginning where my life kind of really started? A lot of people ask me, oh, how did I become a shaman and things like that. And you know, that moment that you described there was when did I step hardcore onto my spiritual path, but it does not identify my journey to being a shaman. That started when I was, well, technically probably 18 months, but my mother saw me talking to ghosts in my crib. And then when I was 5 and my parents divorced and my father was no longer in the way of her, like, inculcating me into this path, then I became, she started teaching me all sorts of stuff around spirituality and personal growth and religion and different kinds of energetic practices and things like that. So, I was raised with that. And so that all of that's kind of in my bones at this point because it was all coming in before the age of reason, right? So she brought home Est when I was 5 or 6. And we studied Seth and Ram Dass and Abraham Hicks and J.C. Knight and a whole host of others. So my entire childhood was spent really learning about all of these sorts of practices and learning how to live a happier life. And yet, by the time I was 28, I had gotten married at 21, thinking I was being responsible because it was the third marriage proposal I had had at that point. And I had said no to the first two, going, I'm too young, or, this isn't the right fit or whatever. Yet I still look back and say, yeah, I got married when I was 21 and stupid. So,
a few of us have done that, though, Kelly. I did the same thing. So,
yeah. So my marriage should have lasted about 6 months, because that's about how long it took me to realize it was a bad idea. But my father had said when he met him, he said, I give it 3 months. And I was like, okay. So to spite my father, I stayed married for 7 years.
Yeah.
And so
now, were you guys living East Coast?
So no, my mother and my ex-husband were both military. So with my mom, I lived in Maryland, Virginia, Louisiana, California. And then I met my husband in California, and then we moved to Hawaii. And then from Hawaii, because he was in submarines. And then from Hawaii, we moved to Connecticut. And I divorced him in Connecticut. And then I met a bunch of people. The people I moved in with were people I had met at the Renaissance Fair, because I used to work the Renaissance Fair in Southern California. And so I had gone to this Renaissance Fair after we got divorced and met these people who ended up being part of this amazing magical circle that we created. They taught me ritual. They introduced me to Wicca. They introduced me to the pagan community and all of that stuff. And we did a huge amount of personal healing, all of us together, facilitating for each other over the course of the 4 years that I lived there. We've referred to that as the magical house. And that's because everybody in the house was doing magic of some kind. And so much so that we actually had house rules for the magic in the house. And it was all a function of things that happened that did not go well. Would you like to hear the magical rules?
What are the magical rules?
So the magical rules are no mucking about with time and space within the confines of the property. If you summon it, you must banish it. Never summon anything bigger than your head, because if you summon it, you must banish it. Don't open doors and windows that you don't know where they're going to go. If doors and windows open of their own accord, do not wait to see what happens. Call the house warden immediately. And guests, corporeal and non-corporeal, may stay for a maximum of 3 days, and they must stay in your room. And always, always, always take out the trash.
Well, that's important.
Every one of those. Yes. Every one of those had a reason. And there was an informal one that came as a result of me doing something stupid during the Scottish play in a Shakespeare in the Park around the corner from our house. It's like, don't summon things with Lady Macbeth. Yeah. So
you talked about the magic house, though. Was there magical help, like from mushrooms or things like that too?
No, I've never really been a plant medicine person. I've always been more of a fan of just get there on my own and do what I need to do in those spaces. There were 2 resident ghosts. There was the house was awakened. The house warden actually pulled a ley line over to hit the edge of the house to wake the house up. So the house was a participant in the protections of the house and things like that. And everyone in the house did something, so we were all helpful to each other. We did a 30-person grail ritual at 3 a.m. one time. That completely railroaded my life and my friend's life. Because we said, I want to be on my spiritual path, and we drank from the cup that had been charged by 30 people. It's like, express train.
And I have to ask you this. When you just talk to people, just somebody you meet or whatever, and you tell them these things, what kind of response do you usually get?
So it depends on the person. I used to live, so we lived in Boston for a long time, and then we moved to Richmond, Virginia, just before we moved here to Panama. And so in Boston, I would get oh, cool, you're a shaman. That's awesome, right? In Richmond, about half the time I'd get, oh, cool, you're a shaman. And the other half the time I'd get a little face.
Hmm.
And, in that 50%, I would get either a face and a uh-huh, or I would get a, you know, my pastor says you're of the devil. And so,
Right.
and I'm like, but these are the same people who are telling me that they have ghosts in their house. And I'm just like, okay. And I'm like, well, my answer to people who say you're of the devil is, the devil is your pantheon, not mine. So I'm not worshiping your devil because I'm not in your pantheon. I believe that the devil exists. I don't have a relationship with him because not my pantheon, right?
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
just find it interesting that, we have all kinds of different beliefs around the world. And, there's people that practice religions with snake charming and, maybe they have a belief that there was a pre-existence and then you live this life. How you perform in this life means you'll earn a reward in the next life. I mean, those views to me, as somebody who used to be religious and really is no longer, they all seem a little bit questionable. I'll also say, leave it like that. But people will really argue if you have a belief that's really kind of different from theirs. So I think they get comfortable in their zone or their religion or their culture. And so, yeah, that's why I asked you that, because I know that, anytime you're kind of out of the mainstream, you're going to get people that question for sure.
yeah. I think it used to happen more often than it does now to me. I think that's because I'm more comfortable in my own belief structures, and therefore I don't attract people to me who are questioning it. They all want to believe me when they talk to me. They just are like, well, I've got these preconceived notions, or I've got this pastor, or I've got this religion that says that it's not okay. And I speak fluent Christian. I came up in the Christian church, and then not my mother, but my every youth group I ever went to and every place we ever went, right? So variety of different Christian backgrounds, from Catholic to Quaker to Presbyterian, Lutheran, Episcopalian, UCC, you name it, I've probably been there. And so lots of different areas of stuff. And so I've read the Bible cover to cover, and I know all of the teachings. And so if somebody is Christian and they want to talk to me about this stuff, I have fluent language in that, and I can have a very lovely conversation with them about it. I am not into proselytizing. I think people need to form their own opinion about what the world is and how it works. I'm like, I will tell you as much as you want to know about what I believe, and I am happy to hear as much as you want to share, and I'm always going to be in respect of what you believe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the only time that's going to be challenged is if you're filled in a hate-based belief structure, and then I'm going to look at you and say you're in pain and I'm sorry and how can I help?
Yeah.
Right? That's it. So from a perspective of being out of the spiritual closet per se, right? It's much easier to be out of the spiritual closet today than it was like 30 years ago. 30 years ago, if you were out of the spiritual, and worse even than in the 70s. In the 70s, when I started, if you were out of the spiritual closet, you were a crackpot, right? That was the definition. You were a crackpot. And by the 90s, it was quietly accepted in the background, but not okay to say it out loud unless you were amongst people you knew it would be okay with. And so when I was doing that whole transition point at my first Saturn return, which happens when you're 28, I'm right at my second one now, so that's just going to mess with my life. Yay. But when I was going through that, I actually started coming out of the spiritual closet to my clients, who I was being a real estate agent at the time. And they started being like, oh, did you know about Edgar Casey and da-da-da-da, and how about this? And what about this house? And what do you think about this house? And da-da-da. And so they were super excited about it. All of them, every single one that I said that I'm psychic and I can do this stuff and I can read energies. And they're just like, that's so cool, right? So interestingly, when I was in Richmond, it has a blossoming spiritual community there, but they don't really have any elders in the area, or at least not ones that are teaching classes, right? They may be there, but they're not teaching classes. And so a lot of it's the blind leading the blind in that area. And so they've got some woogie stuff happening off to the side with some sort of darker energy witchcraft going on, which was not my bag. And then they've also got the highly religious side, and it's a mix, but it is so haunted. It is so haunted. Every person I talked to gave me a ghost story. Every single one. And they all said, well, I've never told anybody outside of the family before, but. And I'm like, y'all need to start talking to each other because this place is haunted. It's like, I've never heard so many ghost stories, and I've lived all over the country and I've traveled all over the world. And I've never had so many people walk up to me and say, I've never told anyone outside of the family, but. And they've got portals in their houses and they've got ghosts all over the place. It's just crazy.
Well, in the South, the South is generally known as, the Bible Belt, right? I mean,
yeah.
So I just got back Saturday from Alabama, and, you're driving down the road there and you look at billboards like hell is real. I mean, it's everywhere. And I've never seen so many churches. And so I think there are still places like that. If I was to come out and meet my neighbor and say, oh yeah, well, I'm not religious. I'm a hopeful agnostic or whatever, they would probably view me as somebody maybe they don't want to associate with. I don't know. I'd like to think times are changing, like you said, but still, I mean, we're still kind of in a country where, it's kind of God-fearing, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that we need to give space for people with different views.
Yeah. Well, and it's always interesting to see things that are counter to some of the teachings of even the highest ranking religious leaders. So, for instance, hell is real. 1997, Pope John Paul II issued a papal bull that said, hell exists, but it is the state of separation from God. It is not a place. And so, yes, hell is real. It is the state of separation from God. And so, like I said, I speak fluent Christian. So I follow these things, right?
I've always thought that too, Kelly. I mean, like, even when I was religious, I used to think that hell would just be knowing that you could have been with your family and loved ones if you had lived a better life. And that would be the hell, right? Is that you're not with them. So, yeah, I never believed in the burning stuff or whatever. So
if somebody believes that's the case, they will create that reality on the other side if that's what they choose. But, it's a whole thing.
Let's not choose that.
Let's not go there.
Let's go back to your youth again. I'm curious because you said that you started having these visions and things and talking to ghosts and stuff as a toddler. So, I mean, did you still have what you would call the normal? I'm not saying, I guess that to me is a little bit not normal. I mean, but to you, it's your life. That's your experience. So to you, that is normal. But did you still have the dolls and the friends and the Girl Scouts and all that kind of stuff growing up?
Absolutely. Yeah. I had, to the extent that I could, but with the fact that we were moving every year or two. I had all of that stuff. But I was always the new kid in town. And so I learned very quickly how to adjust my energy to match with the people that I was meeting so that they would want to be my friend. And I didn't know that that's what I was doing, but that was definitely what I was doing. I was becoming a chameleon, and I was fitting in wherever I would go, because otherwise I wouldn't make friends before we had to leave again. And so, I spent most of my life learning how to adapt to others. And so that was something I had to learn to undo when I did my work, because it made it very hard to come into an identity of my own, because I was always being a reflection of those around me. Mm-hmm. And that's true for people. For me, it was a function of moving all the time. But for other people, if they have a narcissistic parent or an alcoholic parent or somebody who takes up all the space in the room in their childhood, then they end up with the exact same issues as I had. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I do a lot of work with people around that. But when I was growing up, I mean, the vast majority of my time was spent doing normal kid things. But, in the evenings when other kids were watching TV with their parents, I would be listening to personal growth tapes and going to psychic development classes and practicing my tarot cards and learning self-hypnosis and, all of those things.
It's very different. But on the other hand, that's your life experience and that's what you know. Now, you're very comfortable in front of the microphone and talking with me. And do you think some of that came because of, like you said, constantly moving, having to kind of step outside of your shell maybe to make friends and things like that? Because the reason I asked that is my wife grew up in the military. Her dad moved them all over from Okinawa. She was born in Maryland. They were everywhere, New Mexico. And we've had that conversation that when you are the new person, and I was kind of like that too. My dad just moved for jobs, but I was a new guy a lot of times. You want to fit in, which is normal, I think, for an adolescent. You want to fit in. You don't want to stand out and be different. But on the other hand, you need to kind of put yourself out there if you want to make friends, because if you wait for people to come to you, it could be a long time.
Yes, I would say that that absolutely did impact my introvert versus extrovertness. I was a painfully shy child when I was very young, when I was like 3, 4 years old. I was just like, you know. But I think part of that was also because I was living with a rageaholic parent. My father was very angry guy, and so he wasn't physically violent, but the emotional violence and the energy that he threw around was significant. And so I was just, I was in a constant state of panic, right? And so once, my parents divorced and that was no longer an issue, I was able to be a little bit more outgoing and a little more gregarious, and changing schools all the time forces you to be outgoing, whether you wanted to or not, because otherwise you're just spending your whole life. It was just like me and mom, and that was it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
so no siblings then? No siblings?
no siblings, just me and her. So,
so I'm guessing you had a very close relationship with your mother then.
Very close codependent relationship with my mother. We were partners, not parent and child, which was, good and bad. It was more like child and child. She was basically 5 years old my whole life, but, emotionally, we were very close. As a result, we did a lot of this stuff together. And so she was looking for a way to find happiness after her divorce. And so she took me to personal growth classes and ordered tape sets to come to the house. And I listened to everything. So I picked it all up along the way. So, yeah.
As we have podcast episodes where people come on and tell their life story, many, many times the things they did in their youth set them down a path to what they're doing now or eventually became. So the fact that you listen to all these things and now it's almost like your career, that's not surprising to me, just because you had an interest in it from an early age and you just kept up with it while other kids were out, like you say, selling Girl Scout cookies or whatever. Maybe you're home listening to tapes. Well,
and on top of it, my mother was starting businesses. When I got into my teen years, she did a real estate business for a while. And so I went out and looked at houses with her and, just oriented whatever. We did that together. And so I learned about the real estate business. And then she started a home health care agency and I helped her. I did all of the programming for the computer, which involved creating all the punch cards. So that's how old this was, right?
Yeah.
And so I worked as her receptionist for like 6 months. She wrote these books on choose your own story. They used to be you come to this point and then you make a decision and then you go, if you do this, you go to page 67. If you go to this, you do page 27 and right. And I helped her lay those out and write those books and everything. So I learned. My mother and my father were both teachers before they went into their final careers, which for her was nursing. And for my dad was a CPA. And so I also went through nursing school with my mom. She did that when I was 6. And so I was her study buddy for 2 years. And I would do all the flashcards. So all of Grey's Anatomy is somewhere in the back of my brain and occasionally comes flying out of my mouth in times that I wouldn't have had the answer to 30 seconds earlier. But I look it up and I'm always right, which is terrifying. But yeah. But yeah, it's all sitting there. So my mom, really inculcated me into the education side of things and understanding how to structure things and how to study and how to do all of these things and really set up teaching as a thing. And then did the business side of things with all of those things that I was talking about. And then when I was in college, a friend of mine, I was 19, and we had been working for an accountancy firm, and they decided to close their payroll department, which is where all of us worked. And so my friend, who was the head of the department, opened a business and took all the clients to create a payroll company. Well, like 6 or 8 months into it, she ended up on an early version of Prozac and lost her freaking mind. Like went off the deep end. Mm-hmm. She would disappear for weeks at a time and just nobody knew where she was. And so I was her second in command. And so at 19, I was running a payroll company and I had no idea how to run a business. So I immediately was going out and finding classes and books and studying. And and that led me to reading autobiographies and biographies of millionaires and, see where their success was and all of this. So I got deep, deep into studying business at the same time as I was trying to navigate that insanity. And so I ended up moving from there. I met my husband. I was in San Diego at the time. That's where I went to college, was in UCSD. We moved to Hawaii because the boat was being decommissioned over there, the submarine. So I ended up in Hawaii for a couple of years working at the international marketplace in Waikiki.
Oh, I know that very well.
Yeah. So I worked in the management office there, did accounting and bookkeeping for them. And so I learned all about retail space and management from that. And then
did you like the 2 years in Hawaii? Did you enjoy it?
I didn't.
You didn't?
No.
Okay. Because I have a little bit of a Hawaiian theme with this podcast. And so
Oh, do you?
I do, because that was a big part of my life story. But so I'm always curious to get other people's take on Hawaii because, hey, it's not for everybody.
Yeah, we had been on vacation. My mother and I had gone on vacation twice to Hawaii in the previous years. And I had really enjoyed it as a tourist. As somebody who was living there and a military spouse, I really understood what it was like to be a unwelcome minority. Mm-hmm. And so I felt very much, I really gave me great perspective and great compassion for the unwanted minorities in the world, and specifically in the US, because I had the experience of it and it was unpleasant. Yeah. And so, I was discriminated against for jobs. I was discriminated against for various and sundry different things. But, they was always like, oh, you haole. And haole is not a nice term. It is not. They tell the tourists, oh, you're haole, like it's a good thing. But no, it's not.
Well, Kelle, that's the thing I probably heard the most from people who say they didn't like Hawaii. Usually it's people who have lived there. So you're not on vacation, because those are two separate things, like you said. So when you're living there, and I know my wife, she worked for Hawaiian Airlines, and she felt very much like the locals treated her differently. And I would just say, you just need to let them know that you appreciate their culture and that you didn't, because that's what I did, and it worked for me. I still have a lot of great Hawaiian friends and things. But on the other hand, it's definitely a thing. I mean, it really is. And the locals,
and that didn't work
they
for
won't
me.
accept you unless you were there for a number of years, because everybody they meet, they figure they're going to be gone in a year or two anyway. And they're usually right.
Yes, and that's exactly what I was told over and over again. The only reason I got the job at the international marketplace is because they were supposed to be closing. And so they said, well, we're only going to be around for a year or two, so we can stick with you, because I was honest about the fact that we were only going to be there for a couple of years. So I felt like any employer should. I was like, I want them to know, right?
Yeah.
And so, I wasn't surprised when some people were not so. But there's also, there's a lot of cultural negativity between different races. So like the Japanese tend to be the ones who own a lot of stuff, and then the Filipinos tend to be the worker bees, and they're the Native Hawaiians tend to be sort of mid-level management and worker bee, depending upon what the career path is, and there's not a lot of communication between them, and they don't like each other. I've never had so much trouble. I've never been anywhere with so many race relation issues. It wasn't just me being white and military, which was double whammy, right? But it was also other people having issues with other cultures. We literally would have knife fights in the marketplace between vendors. And it was just like, come on, guys, get a grip. You're all here to make some cash. Can you stop telling each other that your wives sleep with dogs? Because that's what would inevitably be the thing that started it. It's just...
When you're around, I can feel it. Give me all the good vibes. Your love is like my sweet island music. Voices so heavenly. passes sometimes. I get a little crankier at night, but you're still here holding my hand, and I cry for no reason sometimes. Pretend something is in my eyes, then you come and wipe them away with your love. It's music, you should use it to rock me steady, steady. Your love, it's healing. I just wanna put it on repeat, so you rock me steady. Your love is like my sweet island music. I want it all the time. When you're around, you know I can feel it. Give me all the good vibes. Your love is like my sweet island music. Voices so heavenly. When you're with me, I just wanna sing along to your melody. Love when you jamming with me. You can bring your ukulele, I'll bring my guava jelly. Love when you jamming with me. You can strum the ukulele as I groove it to your belly, 'cause your love, it's music. You should use it to rock me steady, steady. Your love, it's healing. I just wanna put it on repeat, so you rock me steady. Your love is like my sweet island music. I want it all the time. When you're around, you know I can feel it. Give me all the good vibes. Your love is like my sweet island music. Voices so heavenly. When you're with me, I just wanna sing along to your melody. Your love is like my sweet island music. I want it all the time. When you're around, you know I can feel it. Give me all the good vibes. Your love is like my sweet island music. Voices so heavenly. When you're with me, I just wanna sing along to your melody. I'm singing la 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 ooh, 'cause I la 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 love you. I'm singing la 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 ooh, la 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 la, I love you.
Why is it that some people like yourself have those experiences and someone like me has never had anything like that in my entire life? I lost a son 6 years ago. Love to have a visit from him, or, but never have. So, I mean, I'm always curious as to how some people kind of have that ability to reach out to the other side, and then others like me, not so much.
Well, everybody has the ability to do it. It's just a matter of whether or not you've developed the muscle. So think of it like muscles, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you are laying in bed and doing nothing for years on end, they atrophy, right?
Right.
But if you get up and you work out and you get moving and you do it regularly, then that you build the muscle, right? And, now some people are going to be piano prodigies that they just know, they understand it inherently, and they're just born with it. And other people can become amazing pianists, but they've got to work at it. So, I was a prodigy, in that area. But, I've taught, so many people how to become great pianists, right? So it's just a matter of do you work the muscles? Do you understand what the signs are? Because people are like, oh, my guides don't talk to me. And I'm like, well, tell me what happened today. And they were like, da da da. I'm like, that, and that were your guides talking to you. They're like, what? Right. So
Yeah.
it's just sometimes people just don't recognize that the patterns are coming through. And oftentimes also, and I've been talking about this a lot recently, so it must be relevant. But one of the things that I found is the most powerful magicians are also the most stubborn people. The stubbornness is great for being able to hone your focus and do the work consistently enough to get the results, right? But it's also a challenge. So every gift comes with a challenge. Every challenge comes with a gift, right? And so the challenge on this is that we stubborn people have very strong attachments to reality as we see it, and to our belief structures, and to our sense of our identity and our sense of self. And those three things limit our ability to evolve in a very major way. And so I have a friend of mine, fellow shaman, who has this beautiful way of looking at it that I've adopted, which is, she says, you don't have to believe, you just have to suspend your disbelief.
Yeah. Yeah.
Much like you do walking into a movie, right?
Mhm.
You know
Yeah.
that the characters on the screen aren't real, but you buy in for the purposes of the movie, right? So you have to suspend your disbelief, because when we come at it with this sense of, this stuff is crap and maybe it'll work, I doubt it, blah, 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 then, you're going to manifest your reality, right?
Mhm.
But if you come in going, I wonder what that's about, and just curiosity and openness and an open mind, then, you have the ability to see that things may not be what you think they are. Like back when I was dating, I never dated guys who were like in the spiritual world, because there aren't that many in there. But inevitably I'd be dating engineers, right? Because I have an engineer brain. So we would click. And I always told them, I said, look, I don't require that you believe what I believe. I do require that you not mock me, that you must have respect for what I do and the fact that I believe it, and that you believe that there must be some reason I believe it. You don't have to buy into that reason, but you have to see me as a reasonable, logical person. And if you can't see me that way, then we can't date, right? I don't require that everybody see me that way, but to date me, we have to have this agreement. And inevitably, without me trying, with me just being me, they would all be like, okay, talk to me about this stuff, because clearly this stuff works, right? Because, I would do something like, a friend of mine was leaving to go for a 2-hour flight. And I just started packing as much high protein content as I could into this little brown bag. And I wanted to give her a bigger bag, but I knew she was like the queen of packing small, and I would only be able to get her to take something small enough to fit into that small bag that she had. And so I packed it as tight as I could. I'm like, here, take this. And she's like, why? It's only a 2-hour flight. I said, just freaking take it. Just take it. I don't know why. I just know I have to give it to you. Please just take it. 9 hours later, she texted me and said that she had eaten everything in the bag, could have eaten more, because her flight still hadn't left and all the food places were closed. And thank you for the food.
Yeah.
I was just like,
Yeah.
and so, they see that over time, things like that happening. And they see you having conversations with people that you don't know, that they know you didn't look up on the web, and telling them everything about them. And then you hear the whoa on the other end of the phone when they're being loud and making exclamations and whatnot. And so eventually they all just go, okay, must be something to this. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
how'd you end up in Panama?
Well, 2020, man.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't move, but 2020 happened. My husband and I had both independently, before we met, wanted to live abroad at some point in our lives. And in 2020, we were in Richmond, and it was the energy was so toxic. And it was, we were trapped inside, right? And we started researching possibly moving to Portugal or to Spain, but we couldn't go visit, right? And we couldn't get on a plane, because we were still in lockdown. So we did some research for about 1.5 years. Then we took about 6 months off. And then we started thinking about it again. And I decided that I did not want to be, as much as I wanted to live in Europe, I didn't want to be 6 hours ahead of my clients because I don't do well with the afternoon work, late afternoon and evening. A much better morning person. And so my friend said, she'd been researching where to retire, and she'd been researching Panama for quite a few years, and she was going on a tour in April of 2022. And so I think in March, we were talking to her about it, and we had been doing our own, once she mentioned it, we started watching all the videos we could find on it and whatever. And she came back from the tour in April and said, the only place you'd be happy is Boquete, Panama, because of the temperature, because I'm not a high heat girl. And we said, well, that's basically where we had decided on based on all the videos we had looked at. And so in June, we sold our house. In May, we arranged for an estate sale. In June, we sold the house. In July, we had the estate sale, sold everything we owned, arrived in July with 6 suitcases and the dog, sight unseen. We had never visited. And so people were like, what if you hate it? I said, we did the hard part, getting rid of everything. I said, all we have is 6 suitcases and the dog. If we hate it, how hard could it be to move again? Right?
Yeah. And you do most of your work from home anyway, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All of my work. Yeah. Almost all. I mean, I do retreats. So, but those often end up here too. So.
Well, that's cool. That is really cool.
Yeah.
So I need to mention here that you actually have your own podcast and you've been around a while. Like you said, I think started in 2018. Is that right?
Yeah, this particular podcast started in 2018. Back when I was selling real estate, I had a podcast in 2005.
So this is called Spirit Sherpa.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that you talk a lot about some of the things we've been discussing today, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I talk a lot about that. I talk about spiritually associating, doing spiritual work around your business and your limiting beliefs and your personal growth work and how those things can impact your business. And I talk about, how the spiritual world works and mythology so that you can learn the language of spirit, because symbology is the language of spirit and mythology is the foundation of that. And so, there's series on, we did the 7 Deadly Sins and Virtues series. We did the Wheel of the Year. We did chakra system. We've done a lot of different themes of series that we did. And, I didn't quite get to the walkabout that came after the magical house.
Let's talk about the walkabout.
Yeah, because that's usually a big winner for people. So when I was finishing up my work at the magical house, I was being called by Grandmother Spider. How that looked was I went into the basement. So this was a Victorian house. So it's one of those houses that you have to walk into the center of the basement and find the pull switch for the light, right? Mm-hmm. And so I walked in at night, no lights on, feeling for the thing. And then I felt like this huge spider web that I walked through. And I'm like, whatever this is that I need down here, I don't need. I'll get it in the morning. It'll be fine. Because this was before we had flashlights on our phones. It's like 2002, right? So I went back upstairs. Did not occur to me that I didn't have any spider web on me when I went back upstairs. So I went back down in the morning. There were no spider webs anywhere. And that's when I realized that there was no spider web on me when I came up. And I told my friend who was a shaman, and this is the first time he outed himself as a shaman. He had been, going to the pagan events, and I just assumed he was Wiccan like everybody else that I knew. And no. And so he's like, Grandmother Spider's calling you. I was like, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? This was my first exposure to shamanism. And so he explained it to me and told me that I should listen. And so I started talking to Grandmother Spider. And then shortly thereafter, the guy who owned the house was getting married. And there was some friction caused from him. I had been his best friend. And so I had sort of like the prime spot in the house as the partner, even though we weren't partnered, right? Mm-hmm. And so he was like shoving me down and making me, like this is the wife's spot. And I was like, you didn't need to do that. I was going to give way. It was going to be fine. But it was enough that I was like, maybe I'll just leave. It'll be better, right? I'm going to move out. And so I went to move out, but I couldn't find any place to land. I applied to housemate after housemate, apartment after apartment. I know nothing, absolutely nothing. I could not get a place to live. And so I had been running a teaching group, and I ended up staying a different night of the week with a different student. And so, Mondays were at this person's, Tuesdays were at another's, right? And that went on for about 5-6 months. Then one day I was like, well, I had thrown everything in storage. And I was like, I'm not going to keep this stuff in storage. I don't know what's going on. I had decided to make a trip to a festival that I knew about. And in the moment of deciding to do that, I'm like, you know what? I don't know where I'm going from this festival. I inherently feel like I'm not coming back, at least not for a very long time. So I opened up, I scheduled a time to open up my storage unit and say, look, come take whatever you want. But the deal is, whatever you take, you have to help me take whatever's left to the Goodwill or St. Vincent de Paul, right? And so did that, and I scheduled it. And then I was at one of the people's houses, and her bathroom book was Lame Deer, Seeker of Visions. And I opened it to a random page, and it said, the apprentice shaman, just before their final initiation, will schedule their giveaway.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, shit.
There you go.
I was like, oh my God. I was like, right. And that's what happened, is that I went from there to the festival that I was going to. I ended up having this major vision quest sort of initiation process that happened as part of getting a tattoo there. And then from there, I followed somebody home. And then that started me on a journey that took me 14,000 miles over the next 6 months on top of that. So I was homeless for about a year. And I was living on $350 a month and the kindness of strangers, because I did not have an online business at that time. And so I would get the occasional reading that I would do or whatever. But basically, my car was thankfully paid off by the universe provided that too. They had somebody break into my car and steal what was a $50 laptop that a friend had given me because, he was in tech and it was 4 years old or whatever. And when I happen to have replacement value for anything in my car. And so because he had the receipt still and he sent it to me, they gave me $1,700 for my $50 computer. Nice. And I was like, that allowed me to pay off the last bit of my car so that I went on the road with no debt in that regard. And so basically, I just had to pay for my gas and my cell phone and my food. And people were just setting me up from one place to the next with lodging. They would say, oh, go over here, or hey, come to this festival, or hey, do this, or whatever, right? And so for 6 months, I just went from place to place wherever I was being called to go. And that was a beautiful thing.
I was going to say, do you feel like that kind of, this is what you're doing now? I mean, this is your whole career. You've got podcasts, you wrote a book, I mean, there's a lot that you've got going that's tied to this. I just wondered if that was kind of the thing that said to you, this is what I need to be doing.
I had maybe. I don't think of it that way, but it does end up that way because, I have high school yearbook signatures that read like client testimonials. So, it's not what I do, it's who I am. And I had been doing coaching. I'd been training in the real estate industry in the early to mid 90s, in the mid 90s. So, a lot of the stuff in the real estate world has a lot of personal growth and development in it, but it's not sold that way. It's sold as here's how you make more money, right? But a lot of it's delivered as personal growth content. And so I really wanted to do that. I wanted to do personal growth for realtors because that was my industry that I was in. And because that's what I did when we got to Connecticut. But when I went on Walkabout, which, by the way, the definition for those who don't know is to walk out into the world until you find yourself, right? And so when I went on Walkabout, one of the things that happened is you're constantly singing for your supper because you're staying in other people's homes. And so you're constantly having to entertain them. You have to tell them the same story and the same stuff over and over and over again. It gets very old. After telling everybody for the last 8 stops the same stuff, I just sat down at one stop where somebody was busy a lot, and I used her computer and I started writing it all down, and I wrote 45 pages in 3 days, and that became the foundation for a previous book that I didn't actually publish, but which I gave away at every stop that I stopped at, right? So it was 45 pages that I would just say, here, print this out, here, print this out, here, print this out. And then I would say, read that, and then we can talk, right? So I wouldn't have to cover the basics again. But for me, the Walkabout was very much about learning how to trust the universe. It was about learning how to lean into not knowing what the next step was and being, surrendering to the journey. And being a control freak, that was a tough one initially. But I felt so guided. It was so funny because people would say, "Oh my God, you're so brave." And I'm like, no, not brave. I'm like, don't get me wrong. I'm a brave person. I do brave things, but that did not feel like bravery to me because I felt so guided that there wasn't fear. Right. And so when there's no fear, there's no bravery. Right. And so, did I have to get out of my own way? Sometimes, but not very much, right? Most of it was just, I'm going to go wherever the next step takes me. Yeah, I'm going to go. It's going to be good. The hard part was coming back and then wanting to put a business together and trying to figure out how to take back the action that had to be taken while still maintaining the surrender. Because I was like, but I had the hardest time really trying to balance those two because I went straight back into my control patterns because action was associated with control, right? Focus was associated with control. And so that was a very difficult part of the journey for me to be able to navigate. I have since come to understand what the difference is, but it took me years to figure it out. And I struggled a lot during that time because I was doing the back and forth, right? And I did what is a common mistake, which is putting the universe in the role of parent instead of partner. And therefore going, well, is this what you want? Is that what you want? Is that what you want? And the universe is like, I don't know. Do you want it? You tell me. Is that what you want? Like, when you commit to it, I'll commit to it. That's how this goes, right? And so that became challenging. And to make things even more frustrating, when I was on the journey, I had readings by two different very talented readers who looked at me and said, it'll be more than 10 years before you know the end result of this journey. And what happened was that 45-page book that I started, I would add to over the next 25 years. And I would just add to it and add to it and add to it and add to it. Every time I did something that worked for me, I would just add to the book. Mm-hmm. And in 2017, I took the book. So, I had been giving this book away to people randomly over the years. And then I would circle back around and I would say, hey, did you ever finish the book? What did you think? And they're like, no, I'm still actively thinking about chapter X. And I'm like, if you wandered off from the book and it just lost interest, that's fine. I just would like to know, and they're like, no, still actively thinking about chapter X. And chapter X would be different for everybody. And so I'm like, how long you been thinking about it? 3 months, 2 years. I'm like, you're stuck, right? And they were like, no. And I was like, yeah. So that's why I didn't make it a book in the end, because I realized that people were getting stuck and not knowing they were stuck. And so that's when I turned it into a program. And that program turned into the Woo series, the Welcome to the Woo Squared Woo You series. And so that will ultimately take people through 25 years worth of personal growth work and 10 to 15 years worth of energetic training in 2.5 years. And, I just take out all the empty space of the time that it took to figure out what you need and where you can find it that'll actually work. And therefore you go at Mach speed without like freaking out and burning down and falling down.
So would your book then, The Overachiever's Guide to Spiritual Awakening, does it have some of those same things in that book then?
No.
Okay.
No, that book is a 30,000-foot overview of the spiritual awakening process. So it tells you what are the stages of spiritual awakening, what each stage is defined by, how to transcend from one stage to the next. It tells you all the personal wounds that, so I did 3,000 plus energy scans on people where I looked into their energy field and looked at their chakras, and all people on a spiritual path, and they all had the same 38 wounds. And nobody has all of them, but everybody has some of them. And so I laid all those out in the book, along with, where do they come from and what's a starter healing step for each one and things like that. I also cover spiritual traps that people fall into in the course of their journey, and just things like that. Just sort of it's a primer on how to evolve as a person, from a high end, level view. So it's not the nitty gritty details, but it's sort of the big picture.
Okay. And then I have to ask you about things we don't talk about.
Ah,
Women's stories from the red tent.
yes. I have a friend whose name is Elisa Starkweather, and she started what was known as the Red Tent Temple movement back in early 2000s. And the Red Tent Temple, the concept of it is that it's a place for women to come to be off duty, to be creative, to be in community, to be it's goes back to Anita Diamante's book, The Red Tent, which was about a place that women would go when they were on their periods to be away from everything and to not have to do for however long they were on their period. And so it was the same concept, but it wasn't tied to menses when people were doing it. And they would just decorate the room in all this red fabric. And it was just a beautiful place to just come and be and not have to do, right? And Isadora Liedenfrost was doing a documentary about it. She happened to come to one of the red tents that I was at, and she was filming there. And I had actually done a poem at the event that she had filmed and then decided to not have in the final episode, in the final cut, because it would change her rating, because it was performed in the nude. And so she was like, I loved it, but I couldn't keep it because I didn't want to have the rating and whatever. So she even had me come out and refilm it when she was still trying to decide. But that's how I ended up in that movie. I was in the time when she was doing the filming for that.
I just thought all those things are very interesting. The whole concept, and again, I told you earlier that I had a religious background myself, and just don't consider myself very religious anymore. I just, that's just where I'm at in this path. And I think sometimes I've said this before in previous podcasts, but I don't know. I just feel like I'm living my authentic life, and I think that's what most people want to be able to do. Sometimes you can't. You're someplace in your work career, and you have to, somebody's over you, and they can make decisions based on what you do or how you perform. But when you get to be, where I'm at, you can kind of just do your own thing, and you care what people think, but to a point.
Yeah, I mostly don't care what people think. But it took me a long time to be able to say that. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I live in Boquete, Panama, which is where a lot of retirees live. Everybody's always like, oh, you're still working? When are you going to retire? And I'm like, I live a retired lifestyle right now. I have lived a retired lifestyle for the last 20 some years because I've run an online business. I work when I want to work. I don't work when I don't want to work. I'm beholden to no one except my clients. And I'm always going to give them a level of service that doesn't make me worry about how beholden I am, because that's just how I am. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's, if I'm sick, if I need some time off, my clients are just like, oh yes, take your time off. It's fine. We could talk next week, whatever. They're always so easygoing about it because they know I care about them, and therefore they care about me too. And it works out. So I'm like, why would I ever retire? I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, and plus you need hobbies, and what you're doing is kind of like your hobbies also. It's what you enjoy doing. So yeah,
it's my passion. Yeah.
Exactly.
Why would I do anything else? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Well, Kelle, I sure appreciate you taking the time today and sharing your story. I'll go ahead and put these things we talked about, the book and different things. I'll put it in the show notes so that
awesome.
People want to research you, they can go to your website and different things like that. But thanks so much for telling your story today. I know I learned a lot, and when I think it was Heather, I guess, reached out to me, I was like, I looked at what you're doing. I thought, well, that's different. Let's hear it. Because, hey, if nothing else, I like to give people an opportunity to hear some different life experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in terms of somebody to introduce to your people, if this isn't your normal ballywick, I'm probably more grounded than most because I do a lot of my work in relationship to using the energetics to support my physical reality. Right. So it's a little different than other people you might run into in the same industry. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, appreciate it. Thanks very much for coming on. And listeners, check back in 2 weeks. We'll have another interesting guest here on Nobody Knows Your Story.
Down a little old country road not far away, let's talk story. Well, a little of this